Hi, Mark.
Hi, Santiago. You okay?
How are you? How are you?
Yeah, good. I'm hearing some very interesting music.
I'm happy to see you. Finally.
Good. I bet. This is the first one, isn't it?
This is one, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would like to ask you if we can do a test.
Yeah.
About you've used you have used Zoom in the past.
I have.
Are you familiarized with it?
I usually use Teams, but this I should be all right with this, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because if you can try to share your screen with the slides.
Yeah.
Because I think we were talking yesterday and we thought that it would be better if you pass the slides when you want, so it would be easier for you as well.
Yeah. What's happened there?
There's an option, instead of sharing the whole screen, there's an option which is only share one file or one program.
Right. Okay.
So if you open the presentation, and then so cancel your screen sharing and then open the presentation.
Stop share. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, open the presentation.
And now when you go to share the screen, you should have a possibility to share the screen, just not the whole computer, but just the program.
Right. I'm not getting it all at the moment. Mute. I wonder if, let me just wonder why that is. Let me just close it again. wonder why that happened. So I share the screen, or shall I just open it now? Did you say just open it as we are?
Sorry?
Shall I just open it?
Yes.
Right now. Just open it again. Just see if you can see this.
No.
No, you can't see it.
No.
Okay. Hang on a minute. Okay, let me. Who can share? Only the host, all panelists.
Everybody.
Everybody.
Yeah.
All panelists. Who can start sharing when someone else is sharing? All panelists. Right, okay. And then you should be able to open it now. What last night when I tried it. Can you see it now?
Not yet.
Oh, that's strange.
But if not, we can go normally with the normal screen sharing. I mean, whatever is easier for you. Maybe if you prepare the slides and then click on share your screen normally, just to make a test.
Just desktop and have you got it now?
Yeah, now I'm. You have to put it on full screen.
Full screen, yeah.
And then, well,
slideshow.
Yes, slideshow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
And so if you leave it like that, stop sharing your screen. Okay.
Stop sharing. Yeah.
Yes. And when I introduce you, you automatically restart sharing your screen, and you can pass the slides normally. Okay.
They'll be there already.
Yes. Yes.
On this. Okay. That's fine.
Okay.
Did you say, Santiago, that I had 25 minutes?
More or less. Yeah.
Yeah. I know we want half an hour anyway for a Q&A.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you said the whole thing was 75 minutes. Is it going to disappear in 75 minutes?
No.
I.e. 77, you'll be okay. Okay.
No.
I've done a few where it's disappeared.
Yeah. No. So no, that won't be a problem. But we want to keep very on the timings.
Yeah.
So we make things very smooth and practical, so people can.
I've got two watches here, so yeah, no, absolutely. I'll make sure whatever I do that we have absolutely half an hour at least for Q&A whenever I come in. I take it the Cardinal's just saying a few words at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then the personal testimony is 15 minutes or something like that. Yeah,
there's the testimony of Paulo Montali after the words of Cardinal Farrell, and then goes you.
Okay, that's lovely. You've done really well I'm saying you've done really well. You've done really well to organise it. Let's see how well it goes. I'm sure it will.
I take the opportunity to say hello to everybody. I see that there's people already from many different parts of the world, from Europe, from South America, from Australia. Deacon Anthony Hill, good evening, or I don't know, maybe very good early in the morning. Also, hi Linda, it's so great to see you as well. Well, I cannot see you, but I will explain about today. Today it will be a bit different than normally. We had a small problem with the link. with the Zoom platform, but it won't change anything about our program. The only thing it's that I won't be able to see you, but we have already fixed it for the next session next week. So we won't be able to see you. I know I can see that you are there, everybody, but we only be able to see you when you speak during the debate. Um, um, hmm. Mm, we still have 10 minutes before everybody is coming. Mm.
What's the weather like, Santiago?
It's sunny today. It's
All
sunny.
right.
It has been raining in Rome a lot lately, but today it's a very nice day, sunny, not very cold, but it's not hot neither. So it's perfect weather.
Is this from your office or home or?
I'm at home actually because I'm on sick leave. I don't know if I told you. Maybe I will also explain to the rest of our participants that I'm at home because I had surgery on my knee last week. So on the 21st. So I apologize in advance if you hear children shouting or screaming. It's because family is like that.
We know. What did you have? Did you have cartilage or was it ligaments?
Yes, so cruciate ligament and meniscus. Yeah.
Gosh. Okay. So you'll be back.
Soccer is a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's a bad habit.
It is for knees. Most definitely for knees.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have to ask about whether they are functionally as they should be.
Yeah.
But yeah. How many people were you expecting?
Anche dentro. No, adesso non si vede più niente. L'ospite ha interrotto il tuo video.
So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. Thank you, all of you, for being here for this first session of this webinar series about the future of sports after the pandemic, organized by the Dicastery for the Laity, Family and Life in cooperation with the John Paul II Foundation for Sport. And I would like to thank you, all of you from all over the world. I can see people from United States, from Canada, from South America. We have also a bishop from Chile, Monsignor Quintana, bienvenido. We have people from Spain, from Italy, from France, from Switzerland. We have people from also from the Philippines, from Australia, from New Zealand. There's many people from different parts of the world, which means the interest of this topic nowadays. I would like to start also saying that today the format of the webinar will be specifically a webinar. So you will be able to see the speakers, but not the participants. In the next future sessions, we will change the format so we can see each other's. And also I would like to thank you, Gianpaolo Montali, for his presence, and Mark Nesti as well, for accepting the invitation to be here today with us. So to start as fast as possible, I would like to say that I thought to say a few words as an introduction for these webinar sessions, but I thought that maybe who better than His Eminence Cardinal Farrell to talk about the reason of these meetings. As you could see on our brochure, on our the plan, the goals of these meetings are to discuss a reboot of sports culture and how to focus on the safeguarding of values that can be taught through sports after the pandemic, and build a think tank of sports member, amateur to elite, and work group to develop initiatives that promote sports as an arena of human activity where virtues can foster. And initially, it was intended to have here on live His Eminence Cardinal Farrell with us, but yesterday he received a phone call and to be in a meeting, so he accepted to leave us a message for all of us, which can be used as an introduction to our webinar series, and this one in particular. Cardinal Kevin Farrell, as probably many of you already know, he's an Irish American bishop, cardinal, and he was appointed in 2016 as the first prefect of the Dicastery for the Laity, Family and Life. He was created cardinal by Pope Francis in November of that year. And as I said, an unexpected meeting was set for today that couldn't be postponed. So he sent us a message for all of us, and we hope he will join us later this month in a future session. But I think that the best is to start now listening the message of Cardinal Farrell about this webinar sessions that we are starting today.
Good morning, good afternoon from Vatican City. Greetings to all of you who participate in this webinar organized by the Dicastery for the Laity, Family and Human Life in collaboration with the John Paul II Foundation for Sport. I particularly wish to thank all those who will enrich our conversation with their personal experiences and animate our conversations together. Among you, there are sports managers, former professional athletes, people engaged in education, or in the various institutions and organizations that promote sport. We are all involved in this common reflection on sport, sponsored by our dicastery, at a time of great social and economic uncertainty due to the global health emergency. The title of the webinar is Sport, Rethinking Tomorrow. Precisely because we need to rethink the future of sport together. The coronavirus pandemic has obliged entire sectors of society to grind to a stop. This long intermission has obliged us all to undo and reset our activities, entailing social gatherings, including sports events. We are now at a time when we have to make a fresh start and reschedule our future. A new start can be an extraordinary opportunity of change for the better in our world. We must reflect on how we can restart. Without serious reflection, there can be no improvement, no innovation. We will all simply and mechanically return to where we came from. We will run the risk of repeating the same old patterns, making the same mistakes, and falling into the same mindsets and habits that have proved wrong and are now outdated. We need to start again. This is why we must initiate a serious dialogue on the future of sport in our world. Interest in and closeness to the world of sport is an integral part of the pastoral life of the Church. We know that the pandemic has affected the lives of many families and young people. Many households are facing financial difficulties and have been forced to cut back on expenses for their children's education, including sports activities. Many professional, but above all amateur sports clubs, have seen their financial resources drastically curtailed and are now facing enormous planning problems. The present situation risks driving many people away from sport, especially our young people, especially those living in the most disadvantaged countries and worst affected by the economic crisis. The educational value of sport cannot be neglected if we wish to create a better world for all. Giving young people the opportunity to practice sport on a regular basis means offering them an extraordinary path to future their formative and personal development. A general reduction in sports activities would mean a drastic reduction in the human, moral, and spiritual formation of thousands of young men and women in every corner of our planet. Young people would be deprived of the many opportunities for socialization and collaboration that sports demands and promotes. The church is concerned about all of this because she cares about the integral good of the human person and harmonious social coexistence. In a recent speech at the Italian Sports Center, Pope Francis stated, "You may be asked, how can it be that sport may be used to solve many difficult problems and achieve profound transformation of our society?" We can answer that sport can do this because it improves people and can foster a culture of dialogue and respectful encounters. Sports events at which rival athletes are pitched against each other are called matches, not clashes, with a focus on equal competition, because ultimately, although it is always better to win, to a certain extent, both sides always win. Taken from the speech by our Holy Father, Pope Francis. At a time when the pandemic risks spreading fear and imposing a culture of isolation or even confrontation, sports instead promotes a culture of togetherness. The present health crisis has revealed a great deal of inequalities. Many people are excluded from the medical care needed to heal from the virus. Many people have been left without a source of income. Many young people are excluded from alternative forms of online learning that have become necessary since many schools are closed. Our Holy Father, Pope Francis, has emphasized the importance of a common commitment to overcome the difficult times we experience by overcoming selfishness and inequality. In the first public audience after the lockdown, he stated, "The current pandemic has highlighted our interdependence. We are all connected to each other. To emerge from this crisis better than before, we have to do so together, all of us, in solidarity." Sports plays an important role in this respect and can be an example for other sectors of civil life because of its ability to create solidarity, its ability to create a sense of interdependence between people, and its ability to overcome barriers and include everyone. People of different races and cultures, or social and economic backgrounds, people with other concerns are excluded from opportunities which help them to access the world of sport. It is our desire to promote a cross-cutting reflection on sport, which can bring together believers and non-believers, pooling different experiences and points of view of professionals and amateurs, of managers and athletes, of young people and adults, of the more advanced and the more disadvantaged countries. All these contributions are equally important to all of us. It is my hope that we may all leave this event enriched by the dialogue and common reflection on sport, and together build a new enthusiasm to make sport a place of brotherhood, sisterhood, and hope in these difficult times. I wish to conclude by quoting again the words of Pope Francis to a group of sportsmen and women. I encourage you, dear brothers and sisters, friends and sportspeople, to increasingly live your passion as an experience of unity and solidarity. It is specifically the true value of sport that are particularly important in facing this period of pandemic and above all, the difficult aftermath. In this spirit, I invite you to run together on the track of life. These words were spoken to the participants at the International Athletes Meeting we run together in May of this year. May God continue to inspire us and to help you all as we come together in this wonderful endeavor to create a better world through sports. Thank you, and God bless you all.
So these were the words of Cardinal Farrell. I would like to underline when he says when he said about the sense of interdependence of the peoples and cultures when they play sports, and also the place of brotherhood, and these last remarks related to the speech, the message of Pope Francis to the delegation of participants, the last one, when he said to live your passion as an experience of unity and solidarity. I think the Cardinal's speech has left us a lot of issues that we will be able to touch during these sessions. And I would like to give the word now to Paulo Montali, who will give us a brief testimony, an institutional greeting about this topic about sports after the pandemic. I would like to give everybody a brief introduction about Paulo Montali. He's Italian, class 1960. He's an Italian volleyball coach who has won 2 volleyball European championships with the Italian national team. He has been awarded also for his efforts on the diffusion of the game of volleyball in Italy around the world. And among other things, he has been also a board member of the Roma and the Juventus Football Club soccer teams, and he has been also he's also a sport coach and manager consultant. But we have invited him to give a personal testimony on how the pandemic is affecting sports, and especially in his role as general director of the Ryder Cup, which many of you probably know is the most famous men's golf competition between teams from Europe and the United States. And this Ryder Cup was initially set for 2022, and because of the pandemic, it had to be postponed. So thank you, Mr. Montali, for being here with us, and the floor is yours whenever you want. Thank you.
Thank you. Dear all, first of all, I apologize for my English. I am here to bring my personal testimony, and I hope to be able to express myself properly. I would like to start by stealing you a couple of minutes for a short summary of my sport path, which is fundamental to understand my attitude towards the pandemic which occurs. I thought I would have been doing everything in my life except for dealing with sport, mainly because I hadn't been a high-level player. And I didn't think at all about being a coach, because you need to know I have truly hated all of my coaches, from the first to the last one. I could not understand why Sack, a great talent, was constantly left on the bench. Moreover, I come from a different kind of education. I was studying in medicine at university, but one day on my way to Damascus, I saw the light and I decided that all I wanted to do was the job that I had always been hating, being a coach. From that moment, I have always been occupied in one thing: play to win, to be the first, to be the best. I won a lot, practically everything, but I also lost a lot of times. And I must confess you that I learned more from my defeats than from my victories. I particularly learned more about myself. I have always been leading and managing players and the teams, first on volleyball playing fields and then behind the desk, like for Juventus and Roma, Italian football teams. In the last decades, and for golf now being the director of the 2023 Ryder Cup project. It is exactly because of my personal journey that the pandemic lockdown and the post-pandemic period become for me my challenge now. Because of the pandemic, we assisted to the cancellation of postponement of important world sport events, as far as the Ryder Cup, the most important golf event, foreseen in Rome in 2022. It was moved to 2023. You can easily imagine all that possible impact of 1 year's postponement from an organizational, a financial, a social point of view. An event on which we have been working for the last 4 years with an 11 years long time implementation project. The most difficult choice to be taken were those related to the promotional legacy project, which were addressed to the development of golf in Italy. We had to interrupt and reschedule projects such as Golf at School, Golf is Woman, Social Inclusion and Disability, the Road to Rome events along the entire country, as well as resizing all international golf tournaments hosted in Italy, especially the Italian Open. This is the reason why I consider the pandemic a challenge, as well as an opportunity to rethink differently to sport and to all possible changes that could be made in the future. First of all, thinking about the ineluctability of some events, we need to be ready starting from the planning and strategic phase. Nothing will be as before. Thinking about future projects, will we need to draw up alternative scenarios and prevention procedures that were never to consider before. We will need to be found ready with new teamwork methods and new job profiles inside their organization. The other aspect I wish to highlight is that the pandemic obliged our communities to stop practicing sport. And I certainly way that will continue for a while. Many gyms are now used as classrooms and many others are closed because they can't guarantee safe control measures. All sports centers are sport promotion body risk to see the sporting activity, damaged because of the difficulty in finding structure where practice both for individual and team sports. The risk of a long-term lack of recreational sport practice will have very negative effect on the physical motor activity of the population, regardless of age groups, children, youth, adults, without forgetting the elderly besides the prevention and treatment of multiple disabilities. All this will determine great risk of the people's health, leaving traces on long term and increasing the cost of public expenditure in health. But the other aspect, which I consider even more important, is the social relational aspect of sport activity, especially in team sports. One of the most important sport values is the education to the respect of the rules and the coexistence between people, playing with others, accepting the diversity. The family, the school are centrally the most important areas where individuals learn to be human beings. But sport, through its metaphor teaches, is in a natural and practical way. We must safeguard the educational aspect of sport and avoid that the parcel of even worse a long-term renunciation produces social aftermath. To put in danger the mantra, sport, teachers of life. Thank you at all.
Grazie, Gianpaolo. Thank you, Gianpaolo. Thank you very much for your testimony. And as you said, pandemic is already a challenge for sports, but for sure, we believe that it can be also an opportunity to make things better. And as you said, nothing will be like it has been until now in the future, but it's an opportunity to make sport better and more humanized, more focused on the human being and not on other factors that until now we have seen. And now I would like to introduce our main speaker, which is Dr. Mark Nesty. Mark Stephen Nesty is Scottish, class 1959. He's a specialist in psychology applied to sport, especially in relation to professional football, tennis, golf, and cricket. And until a few months ago, he has been also associate professor in sport psychology at the Liverpool John Moores University in the United Kingdom. Mark has a lot of publication and essays, but he has written 6 books during his career, and his most recent was published by Routledge with the title Meaning, Spirituality and Psychology in Sport last year. He's now working as a British Psychological Society Chartered Sports Psychologist with the first team players and staff at the Yorkshire County Cricket Club and the Aston Villa Football Club. And I would like to thank you, Mark, to accepting us our invitation to be here with us and help us to go into the deep of the pandemic situation in sports from a sociological and psychological point of view. So whenever you want, the floor is yours. Thank you, Mark.
Okay, thank you, Santiago. When we get going, if you want to give me the 5 minute to completion time, that would be great. Are you going to throw the slides up, or am I going to put them up?
No, you have to do it. If
Okay.
you can share your screen so
Okay.
everybody can see them.
Yeah. Have you got that?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
You got that? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I'm just going to start straight away with a link into Paulo, who I've never met before, but I think it's very pertinent to what I'm going to talk about, I think, in the next 25 minutes or so. He used a very strong word. He said he hated his coaches. I would not dare to say that, certainly not in a Zoom presentation, but I would say, actually, like him, I really disliked my coaches and PE teachers. The people who introduced me, if you like, to formal sport. But the people who I loved and who I suppose all those years ago are part of the reason that I'm sitting here talking about sport right now, were teachers who were not specialists. They were not technical specialists. They didn't have coaching qualifications. They had a passion and a love for sport. And the way that they taught sport, and I'm talking about football primarily and rugby and cricket, but the way that they taught these sports was to allow the individual to start from their own particular perspective and to be authentic, whilst respecting the rules and respecting that obviously there's a team dynamic and there's things that need to be done, that you work in a particular way to try and achieve a particular aim. And so that left a big imprint on me that actually leadership in sport and the type of leaders we have, beyond their technical skills, if you like, beyond introduction to the physical side, would be crucial. So I'm a sports psychologist. I've taught in British universities for 25 years until I retired last year. And as it says in the title there, I'm operating as a consultant at the moment, working with athletes. I'll describe some of that in a minute, what that actually involves, because it's relevant to what we're going to talk about. And I think it's worth saying that I could have stayed in my university position, but I wanted to stop and come back down to the ground. I typically have been allowed to depart the university and live in amongst sport so that I could understand and bring that idea back into my teaching, back to my students. In other words, to visit the ground so that I could return to the university, where some people might think we deal with abstractions and maybe in another way that we are detached. So to bring that back in, and this is absolutely crucial. I know I'm speaking from a UK perspective, and I'm sure this is shared in many places around the world, but there are at least 150,000 students in our universities in the UK studying sport, sports science, coaching, psychology, physical education, who are being exposed to ideas related to sport. I think what's happening right now is going to present and is presenting an opportunity for us to impact on the education of those students who will be the future leaders of sport, the future coaches, as well as people who are out there right now. So there's a few things just to, as it were, to start off the theme that I think I have in this presentation. I think really important thing there is just to say, I am working inside a Premiership club part-time at the moment, but that's not really what I'm going to be referring to today, Aston Villa Football Club. I've only been there a relatively short time. It takes, those of you who might have worked in professional sport know it takes months and years to gain trust as a psychologist, most definitely, but as any member of staff, particularly when my work depends on confidentiality and relationships. So much of what I'm speaking about is much more to do with the individual sports, as well as some of the team sports players, but outside of that football club. But in general, I would say the way that I work, which is with the athletes, but most certainly with the coaches, is focusing on the psychology of performance. That's why they pay to put you in the building. That's what sport at all levels is partly about, performing and winning, as we heard His Eminence speak about. But central to that is the well-being of the participants, the physical well-being, the psychological, and I'm going to suggest the spiritual well-being of those participants. So that's crucial. And so that has implications for, I think, where we are now. And this crisis we're in is a moment to reflect on all of those things, but maybe particularly the spiritual well-being. What does that actually really mean? We make great claims for what sport does as a vehicle, but what does it actually do in relation to maybe that last component? The work I do is typically one-to-one, so it's very intense, it's individual, it's confidential, it relies on relationships, trust, personal contact. So you can imagine that's been quite a challenge. And it's typically with professional athletes, from some of the highest paid athletes that we have in our country to people who struggle, absolutely struggle, and people who are not receiving any income directly at the moment either. So a whole range of athletes and performers, but all sharing a passion and a love to be better at what they do. That's what it looks like. That's what it looks like in normal times when you have crowds. And that's been a heck of a challenge for people, professional athletes playing in stadiums with no crowds. What does that mean? What does that mean for the crowds and the public not being able to take part in this? What kind of reflections have they had as well? So these are two different sports, different environments. Individual sports performers, golfers and tennis players that I work with obviously face, again, some very different challenges in terms of what they encounter. I think generally speaking, this pandemic has brought to the fore something that sports people are always faced with. They're always talking about, certainly the coaches and the athletes over the last 25 years I've worked with in professional sport and outside of professional sport, are talking about adversity, about how important and how good adversity is. So that's a strange thing to talk about. Some even will say things like, you know, sport might be about joy and happiness, but it's also about sacrifice and suffering. Words that we don't typically associate with maybe recreational sport. But if you speak to many amateur and recreational sport performers and they describe their experience, there's lots of sacrifice going on there as well. So in my experience, I think that listening to the athletes and coaches, some have actually thrived during this period. Some have actually taken time, and we'll talk about this in a little bit in a minute, but taken time to reflect on why is this important to them? Why are they doing this? Why have they chosen this life? Why is this life chosen them? So adversity has a way of throwing people back on themselves in a way that coaches particularly often would like their athletes to be like that, but it's very difficult to artificially engender that. Here we have something that's affected the entire world, sport included, and has actually confronted people with this very powerful word in sport. I think maybe another thing people talk about is being able to have some kind of balance, some kind of harmony, not overreacting. Sport is full of the highs and lows of emotion. I mean, that's one of the appeals and attraction about it. It's a form of art. It captures people, it takes them out of themselves. And yet top level performers, all of the ones I've worked with and the ones who are coming through, know that attempting to maintain perspective, your defeat is never as bad as it seems. Your victory is not a guarantee of another victory. So trying to keep things in perspective is really important for individual performers and teams. And I think this pandemic, for sport as a whole, but participants and coaches and athletes at various levels, has reminded them how important this is. Maybe people have reflected on, why is this so important? Particularly those who are not paid and not paid well. But that's a very small group. That's a very small group in sport. Why is this important to me? Why do I put up with something like this? What is it that it means to me? So maybe deeper questions have been asked. Sometimes they're articulated, sometimes they're only maybe thought. Like maybe these are things that might emerge. And also a paradoxical way of thinking. Actually, sport, as we just found out, is not that serious. Health is serious. Producing food is serious. The economy is serious. Sport is trivial. But actually, it's not trivial at all. It's incredibly serious. So it's a paradox. It's like music. It's like drama. Here in the UK, drama is very important, live theatre and acting. And they have been devastated by what's happened to them, the lack of performances, the challenges they've had. And yet, if you think about it, sport at all levels, including the highest level, whether it's golf at the Ryder Cup, whether it's professional football in the Premiership where I have worked, where it's in cricket at the highest level, nothing is produced. No car is produced, no food is produced, nothing. It produces nothing. huge amounts of money involved, but no product is produced. So this is clearly something that is very much connected to something beyond material, beyond the physical. There's something else going on here. And I'm suggesting that one of the things that this is pointing to is meaning. We'll come back to that in a minute because it's quite a heavy topic, and I hope that some people here respond to that and find that a challenge and interesting. But if I return more closely to my own experiences, I'm finding a lot of the athletes and coaches that I've been working with during the lockdown have been missing the personal dimension. It's one of the passions of sport to be in a team, and obviously for golfers and tennis players, particularly the level I work at, who have a very tough life traveling around the world and don't make fantastic sums of money. They miss the personal dimension. It's been reduced. I know, look at what we're doing right now. And yet, strangely, I've had sessions with athletes and players where they've actually described that using phone calls, almost like, dare I say it, a kind of secular confession, where they've enjoyed not actually being physically present, where they've enjoyed having to listen more actively to a voice rather than see an image. So there's been quite a few things that have emerged in my own existence as a psychologist that relate to communication. And what is communication? Is it a spiritual enterprise as well as a psychological one? And then very tangible things about losing jobs, fear of jobs, contracts not being renewed. All of these sorts of things have happened to people outside of sport and within sport. So here's a chance, if you like, to empathize. People lose their jobs throughout the world, outside of sport, in normal times. And here in sport, people are facing that huge uncertainty. And again, that's throwing it back. And this is athletes, coaches, administrators, everyone. And it's throwing it back on people. What exactly is important? What's central to me? And this includes many people in sport. Let's be fair, most people in sport do not receive huge sums of money. In fact, it's a huge struggle for most people. And many amateurs sacrifice huge amounts of time and effort and energy to take part in something they love. So this is touching everyone. At a more serious level, talk of illness and death, mortality. I feel that not just in the universities, not just in the academic environment I work in a university setting or have done in the Western world, but certainly in my own discipline of psychology, there's been much effort to reduce or remove any discussion about mortality. Let's not talk about anything serious. And particularly in a field like sport, where everybody quite understandably speaks about youth and joy and all of those wonderful things that go alongside participation. But sport also involves the end of careers. It also involves people who are taken out of their sport careers through injury, people who do not achieve what they want and are left bereft, depressed, sometimes suicidal. So the illness itself is maybe reminding sports people that they are not detached, that they are part of the world, somber though that might be. In terms of psychology, if there are any psychologists listening, for me, this has been an interesting moment when maybe some of the reductionist approaches to psychology, the cognitive and behavioral approaches particularly, that tend to see human beings just as material, just as matter, are maybe being questioned again. When people are actually talking about more holistic approaches that use words like the person, personal, relationship, those words are key, encounter. These are words that can't be reduced. They're not reductionist. They can't be reduced to a material conception of human beings. So at a deeper level, maybe existential phenomenological psychology, which the church over the years has sometimes encouraged certain strands of it, because it takes a truly holistic, meaning body, mind, and spirit perspective of the human person, an anti-materialist perspective that is so needed in my discipline of psychology, so needed in many of the universities of the Western world at the moment, and not least in sport. And then the church and other spiritual traditions have maybe had an opportunity for their message to be heard differently. This is not business as usual. There's all sorts of things happening that could never have been predicted, that were never expected. And maybe people begin to think a little bit deeper rather than just day to day in their perspective. When I wrote this book with my Lutheran colleague, who's a fantastic writer, and she has a good theological background, many of my colleagues, certainly English-speaking colleagues, were rather shocked. How can you speak about meaning and spirituality and sport and exercise, not least if you've worked in high-level professional sport? These terms, meaning and spirituality, surely have nothing to do with high-level sport. Maybe at lower level sport, they might mean something. But actually, and I hope that we've captured some of that in a small way in the book, we're arguing that meaning and the spiritual aspect is fundamental to sport at all levels. From the top golfers who will be playing in that Ryder Cup event in 2022, 23, to people who take part in sport once a week who are in their 70s. Everybody has the potential to be touched by this in a deeper and more meaningful way. In terms of psychological concepts, anxiety has been huge. But anxiety is typically seen, and often maybe in a Western context, as something we should remove, something we should get rid of, something that's bad. But maybe during this pandemic, people are beginning to realize, and sports performers and coaches most especially, that actually anxiety is sort of always there, and that sometimes it's actually quite a good sign. This pandemic has probably made people anxious, amongst other things, not so much just about performance, but about their identity. Who am I? What am I? Why am I doing this? What is the purpose behind what I'm doing? These are deep questions that typically don't come to the forefront of your mind unless there's a crisis, unless there's something difficult. So I know I'm leading towards, if you like, maybe some things that might be optimistic, some things that might be hopeful from this very difficult moment. But I think that might be one. Isolation and loneliness. I think Paulo has spoken about this, or certainly His Eminence Cardinal mentioned this as well. The difference between being isolated and not lonely. Again, my individual sport performers, particularly in golf and tennis, are all over the world, often very isolated, very much on their own. But they're finding that they're not lonely if they have ideas, if they have good quality material to read, if they have contact with people who wish them well, people who are crucial to them. It's not about numbers, it's about the quality of the contact. And maybe it's reminding people that community is not just a word, it's something fundamental to a human person. We are individuals who live in community. That's surely a definition that sounds so academic and yet is being experienced by so many in sport right now. Community is essential. It's like water. It's that level. So what about, just to finish off, some changes and solutions is a little bit strong, but maybe some proposed ideas. Maybe one of the things that's coming from this is how fragile, maybe a deeper level, maybe even a spiritual level, how fragile it all is. And by it, I mean life. I mean the existential question of life. I mean people being, if you like, confronted by this pandemic in terms of how quickly and unexpectedly things could be taken away. Who ever thought we would be doing this a year ago, 2 years ago? You would never have imagined that this would happen. Sport sometimes can seem to live in its own bubble, particularly at the highest level. And it's fully understandable because it's so all-engrossing. There's so much passion. There's so much at stake, it appears. And yet it's stopped. And it might sometimes feel as if it's not come back properly. So I think these experiences will bring something for some people in the future. And most certainly, I think we have an opportunity. And the opportunity is to build, to nurture, to grow, to develop, words that were used before the pandemic, words that everybody's familiar with. We're so familiar with them that they've lost their effect, I believe. Because really, the time now for us all is to say, but what? To build and nurture and grow what? It's not just about the process, it's a process leading to what end? maybe that end, and I would say this, but then I hope I'm in the right place to be saying this, maybe part of that is to see sport not just as physical, technical, tactical, not just psychological, but actually a vehicle for spiritual development. I'll say something about this maybe in the Q&A, but I worked in the UK, and many of my colleagues and friends from the United States in the evangelical Protestant tradition have been writing for 40 and 50 years academic literature in the universities explaining from their tradition how sport can develop the spiritual at all levels, from the highest levels to recreational, from youth to professional, from the youngest to those who are in the senior category, how it can be a vehicle for spiritual reflection. And in my own applied work as a sports psychologist, working with athletes sometimes from all around the world, particularly in Premiership football in the years that I've been involved since 2001, from some countries in the world, the athletes talk more about their spiritual sustenance and development than their psychological. They see what they're taking part in as something that needs their faith to perform, not in a crude way, not in a reductionist way, but that it gives a sense of meaning. It gives an identity beyond their sport. So there's a huge opportunity for this, for us, for the church and others. And as I say, if we could take a leaf out of our evangelical Protestant colleagues and friends, they've already gone down their path and have much good work. I think we have much to offer from our tradition. So how important is it for me to have these things? The psychological, physical, community, family, all of these things. But what about faith, the sacraments, church? These have been taken away, rightly or wrongly, these have been taken away in different ways in different countries, affecting all of us. And that includes people in sport. And you know what they say? I'm sure every country's got a version of this in their own language. To appreciate something, it has to be taken away sometimes. This has been taken away. What does it mean for people in sport? What does it mean for the population at large? Just a couple of things to finish with. Resilience is a word that is used. It must be close. I don't know what the Latin is for resilience in Italian, but it must be very close. Resilience is a word that psychologists have been talking about in my country for the last 20 years. How do you build resilience? Well, here is an opportunity. This is an opportunity now. You need to talk about it. We need to reflect on what we've just experienced. We need to deepen our understanding of what this means. And one of the ways of talking about resilience in an English way, a very basic way, is to say it's about keeping balance. It's about harmony when you're facing really difficult moments, not moving to the extreme, holding steady. One of the things that maybe I've heard from my athletes which has really been interesting is how many of them have actually been through their own minds, through their own critical thinking, wondering about exactly the reactions of their governments. Have we done the right things? Have we locked down too soon? Have we locked down too late? Is a vaccine possible? Is it not? Questions that athletes, maybe people might be surprised to hear that athletes are interested in the world outside. But last time I looked, some of them were actually human beings. They have families. They live in communities. They're interested, thinking for themselves. So maybe one of the qualities that's coming through here is a development of what we call critical thinking, the capacity to engage in difficult material and develop ideas from that material for yourself, something we're always asking for. And lastly, the virtues, much spoken of, but how important are those terms? In sport, we would use different terms there. You might not use the word fortitude, but people talk about courage and developing courage. They talk about confidence, not arrogance, and being linked to being grounded is a word we would use in English, which means being humble. All of those experiences, all of those virtues are being encountered in different ways by different people through this experience. What can we do to draw those out when we pass through this moment? What can we do to make those understood more fully and deeply in practice? An increase in reflection has taken place in some. Maybe self-awareness is developed about their emotions and about their thinking patterns. Even some people, self-knowledge, they may even begin to understand themselves more fully and deeply, which we're called upon as Christians to do, to understand ourselves more fully, to be the person we should be. And maybe at the end of that, for some, there has been some kind of spiritual growth in this experience. And maybe that will be something they will take forward. Just to finish, my last slide here. So how many will continue to build on some of these ideas I've spoken of here when the pandemic is finished? Well, this is not a very wonderful way to put it, but there's many, many studies from different areas, from military and also from business and from existential phenomenological accounts of learning, a whole range of studies that typically say when the dust settles, only 5% or 1 in 20 truly learn, really learn. Now that sounds very negative. That sounds like a recipe for despair. But maybe one way to view this would be, but what if those 1 in 20, assuming that's correct, turn out to be the new leaders, the coaches, the people who set the framework, the people who make the stand, the people who contribute to new academic understanding or new practices on the ground, at whatever level of sport this happens to be. And just behind that will be people who are very close to that level of understanding. So it's not quite as negative as it sounds. But surely for the church and people of faith, there's an opportunity to reflect that play is hugely important in our lives. Maybe this has told us when we've had play removed that maybe play is much more important psychologically and spiritually, not just physically. We know about the physical benefits. But what about the psychological and spiritual benefits of play? Maybe sport has been embarrassed about that. Certainly other areas of the arts are not embarrassed about it. Maybe it's time for sport to make some claims, to deepen the understanding. Maybe it's time for us to actually draw on all sorts of work, be it theological, philosophical, the doctrine of the church, the practice of the faith, some wonderful academic literature that maybe I'll have a chance to mention just at the very end if I have time, to show that sport has the potential to be a vehicle that leads us to reflect on the deepest of things, that it really is something worthy of that type of contribution. And that's one of the reasons why we are so passionate and care so much about it. I'll leave it there, Santiago, and I have a few other things, but I'm sure I can drop them in the Q&A. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for so many different ideas, and you can cancel your screen if you want.
Are you back in?
Okay.
Okay.
So as I was saying, thank you very much for so many different and interesting ideas. I've written many things you have said about the difficulties that we are facing right now, and also the opportunities we have also during these days. I thought when you were saying that you have to build a relationship to gain trust with the athletes, and that it's a confidential relationship. They talk about many different things when they talk with you. I thought that even that it's very similar as some sort of a sports minister for them, someone they can open their not only their minds but also their souls, their greatest aspirations they have. And I like very much when you said about missing the personal dimension, that the athletes are not detached, they are part of the world, and the difference between isolation and loneliness. I think that if there's something that this pandemic has taught us, or maybe two things, in my opinion. One is about the fact of being together, even if we are alone, if we are isolated. And the other thing is, as you said, how fragile it all is. We thought, and we can see in the Bible, but also during history, so many times that people thought that they were invincible, and because of something stupid, we can think about the virus, which is the smallest thing you can imagine in the world, and has taken the world apart in less than a month. And so how fragile the world it is, and sport as it is part of the world of the society. But but also it's an opportunity to build, to nurture, to grow as a person, as individuals, but also as as a community. With this said, I would like to open this time for the debate and for questions and answers. I I would like to explain there are two different possibilities to answer to question, to make questions or to make comments. One is if you only want to make a question, you can write it on the chat. You write a question, you can write it to me or on the chat, and I will make these questions to Mark. Otherwise, you can ask to make a comment, and we will make you a member, a panelist, so you can switch on your webcam and you can make a comment. But if I would like to remark that as we only have 30 minutes, comments have to be not up to 3 minutes. We have to be very simple and go to the point so we can have the opportunity to share our ideas to the rest of the participants, and also to enjoy with the answers of Mark. And I would like to start with one question that Stuart Weir has written to you. He says, you're a professional psychologist and a Christian. The two. In what ways are you similar to a football club chaplain, and in what way different? Thank you, Stuart. And if there's someone, as I said, who wants to do the next question or comment, just raise your hand or write on the chat, and I'll give you the word. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. A lovely question. Just to say that certainly in English, there have been a number of articles as well as books on chaplaincy in sport in recent times. So I'm sure the questioner knows of this literature, but there's a lot of literature out there on this topic. Specifically to answer his question, I've spent a lot of time over the years working with chaplains who are located in some professional sports clubs. And I would say the major difference is this, that I'm interested in performance and well-being and psychological well-being and spiritual well-being, but I'm interested in performance. The chaplains that I have worked with try to make it as clear as possible that they are interested in the person and not performance. And that, if you like, is a subtle but really important distinction. It doesn't mean they don't want them to do well, but it means as a psychologist, I spend time trying to help the person to be a better performer. It just so happens that sometimes that involves the spiritual aspect as well. However, typically this is the athlete or the coach who brings that to me. It doesn't happen often from UK athletes, but it certainly does from athletes I've worked with from other countries of the world. So I'm certainly not a chaplain. And I think, and you can see many things, but the major distinction is I'm focusing on performance. The chaplain should not be.
Okay, thank you. I would like to give the floor now to Jaime Fillol from Chile.
Okay.
Can you hear us?
Thank you. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Welcome. Good morning.
Yes. Yes. Good. Still morning for me. Yes, I'm far away. 5 hours difference. Thank you for the opportunity to participate, and now this after this presentation, I would like to say that I really appreciate it. I appreciated very much what I heard from Mark. When I first saw the topic, a sports psychologist, I was dubious if I really wanted to hear the presentation of a sports psychologist, because I have, having been a past tennis player and a coach, still I continue working with some of the kids in tennis. I see that the psychology of sports has focused their intentions mainly in the performance. When Mark introduced himself as someone that works in the performance and the well-being of the person, I really thought, oh, I'm okay, I'm in the right place. I want to pay good attention to this. And so I appreciate and I thank Mark for the presentation, because it kind of falls in the lines that I like. The things that you've said, Mark, are very meaningful to me. I'm a physical education teacher also, and I work in the preparation of PE future teachers and coaches. And it is very difficult to make known to the people in the sports world, at least in Chile, but I can see, I've seen the problems that athletes in the world of tennis have everywhere with their performance, and how they're trying to get some kind of a recipe that will let them have the confidence that they need to win. And when you mention the basic humanity of the athlete, and the sports psychologist is not looking really into that. It's trying to see if the performance is going to be better, because I'm going to help him concentrate better. I'm going to help him reduce the anxiety, and well, you know much more than that than I know. But they don't look at the humanity or the characteristic base of that athlete. And they don't see not only the sports psychologists that I've been around, but also the same coaches, even though they have studied profoundly the topic of competition, they don't see that it is that the good and strong human characteristics of the athletes that allow him to perform better. It is when they talk about I do grassroots sports, and to do grassroots sports is not a very important thing to do. The important thing is to coach a professional, and we have the tendency to forget that it is at that younger age when we introduce all of the things that you have mentioned, respect of the individual formation, education of the person. Certainly, also, like you mentioned, I see a very close relationship of faith and sports. But
Gracias, Jaime.
I don't want to bore. I just want to mention one thing. I love the idea of spirituality in sports, because very often people mention that sports is very good. It does do you good. You work teamwork. It's a very popular thing to do when you in sports you strengthen your teamwork. And actually, much better word is a term that in English is used, which is team spirit. If you have team spirit, not only you're enjoying what you're doing better, but you're also winning. Because when you manage to have that spirit in the game, even the people, spectators, can see that there's something, a higher level of accomplishment.
I mean, let's let's give the opportunity to Mark to answer, because
sorry,
otherwise it will be too long. Yeah.
Thank you, Jaime. Thank you, Jaime. Lots of questions. Fantastic. Let me just pick two. Let me pick two, maybe three. My view around psychology and sports psychology, and I don't understand why it's controversial at one level, is performance and well-being are always related, because there's a human person in front of you, and they're always related. Why psychologists and sports psychologists will resist, if you like, talking about well-being is because of the models of psychology that have dominated the Western world, and therefore the English-speaking world, and therefore much of the world, are based on measurement. It's really difficult to measure the spiritual element of someone. In fact, you could say it's ridiculous. So part of the problem is psychology itself, how it's been conceived in the Western universities. It's about quantification and measurement. So spirituality, faith, these words don't mean anything. That's one of the reasons I've left university early, is so that I can write about these words in a way that is in more, I hope, more keeping with a philosophy that is grounded in the person, some of which is grounded in Catholic writing. So that's a crucial first statement to make. And maybe the other one you said about, just go to the other one you said there, Jaime, about spirit. That there is lots of wonderful psychological writing now by somebody called Mihai, Csikszentmihalyi. We'll hear from Father Pat Kelly next week. I'm sure he'll mention this, on the concept of flow, being in the zone, which is a spiritual experience. And that's where you are your most happy and your best performances, both together. And it is that place that all top-level tennis players know intimately, but actually recreational tennis players experience it as well. Everybody does. And that's one of the places, if you like, that we experience something that explains the deep connection that we all have to this thing that is not just about the physical. So there's huge amounts of effort that can be done in terms of studying that, explaining it to coaches who will recognize it, because it's from the ground. It's connected to the ground. It's real. It's not abstract. The real challenge, just to finish, the real challenge is the psychology that dominates the universities in the Western world is mostly opposed to what I've just said, because you can't see it, you can't touch it, and you can't count it. And if you can't do that, their view is it doesn't exist, which is their view of spirituality. Thank you, Santiago.
Thank you, Jaime. Thank you, Mark. I would like to give the opportunity to make you a question to Kevin Marston. Can you hear us, Kevin?
Yes, thank you, Santiago.
Hi.
I'll try to be very brief. I have two things I listened from both you, Mark, and from Paulo. One, there is an absence. We're living in a moment of absence, of privation, of fasting in a way, and of digiuno in Italian. And we see that in sport. There are no crowds. Sport is almost artificial at this point. And I wonder what lessons we can learn from that in the sense of the real presence of sport, from a sporting perspective, also from a spiritual one. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts on the question of presence, absence, fasting, and the real presence of sport and linked to the faith. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful question. I said I wasn't going to speak about my current football club in any detail. I most certainly won't. That wouldn't be right. But obviously they have been playing, you know, in Premiership stadiums with no fans. And that's what you're asking about. And the Premiership, everybody knows, is the biggest football in terms of money and profile. It might not be the best. It might be the best. Who knows? But interestingly, my understanding is, and this is not from my club, but this is from conversations we're all having, that some players are actually enjoying the purity, the opportunity to actually play the game back in a way that they did when they very first started off, when there was no fans, and hopefully the parents closed their mouths, to actually experience just the game itself. And maybe from a psychological point of view, some are benefiting because, you know, fans bring excitement, but they also bring a critical perspective, as in a negative perspective, in terms of errors and mistakes and negative anxiety. So there's all sorts of things that will be reflected on. And of course, everybody wants fans back, absolutely, because of what they contribute to this experience at a community level, at least, and beyond that. But I also think that for one or two individuals, and some maybe more than others later on, they're beginning to reconnect to what is it that I loved about this movement? You know, Jaime's talking about top level tennis, so that's what he's been, and that's where he's been. I bet he's still playing. What is it that you love about? Some of us here are still playing, and we shouldn't be, but we are. And so it's a reconnection maybe between some of the people at the very highest level of the game and those of us who are still running around with bad knees, Santiago. It's just one of those moments. And that, to me, that says there's something bigger going on here. This is not just a physical pursuit. This has to be explained in a deeper way, a richer way, as well as a physical way. And that richer way is psychological, but also spiritual. Thanks, Kevin, for that question.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you again. I would like to give the opportunity to ask you to Daniele Pasquini, but in the meantime, while he prepares his question, I would like to read a question from Kerry Calvesberg. He says, you mentioned that in our tradition can learn a lot from the works of our evangelical and Protestant brothers and sisters. Would it be possible to provide us links to some of these suggested, recommended, pertinent works?
Let me answer that by saying that in 2003, I joined a university in York, in England, and this lovely little university supported us to have the first centre for study of sport and spirituality at a university that we knew of, where we were going to draw on academic literature to consider sport from a psychological and spiritual dimension. And I would say 95% of the literature was American, North American, and it was from the evangelical Protestant tradition. I'm not avoiding the question. What I'm saying is, if you're able to speak English or your English at a reasonable level, you will be smothered with books and articles on sport as a spiritual pursuit, as coaching in spirituality, as chaplaincy from a spiritual perspective, the interface between psychology and spirituality, a huge amount of literature that everybody in the English-speaking world, should they want to, is exposed to. Unfortunately, interestingly, many of the universities, because of postmodern perspectives, because of the way the universities see themselves, are very reluctant to embrace this literature. In America, there's universities obviously who do, but there's a huge amount. So I'm sure I can provide some suggestions, but I think you'll be shocked. 50 years of massive amount of literature. Not much Catholic literature, but it's coming. Not much Catholic literature, huge amounts from other traditions that we can add to and contribute our own unique voice.
Thank you. I have a lot of questions. I still have 6 questions other than the one from Daniele. So let's go with Daniele now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Santiago, and thank you, Mr. Nefti. A question: before pandemic, sport was considered a positive experience for young people, but also for other people, empathic, social accepted, politically correct, and so on. During lockdown, sport was stopped because because sport needs proximity, needs contact between people, and pandemic situation instead needs to stay far from each other, needs the distance between people. Okay, and all media, all scientists tells us that we have to stay far from each other. Sport needs to stay next to each other. Okay. This mediatic bombardment of this message will change the perception of the sport as an empathic experience in the next year. Okay, it is in the next year, not so far, but in the next month and the next year, people can have fear to practice sport.
If we're talking about in this immediate period now, some sports, because of the nature of the sport, so golf here in the UK, and tennis, but most certainly if I speak about golf, so I know something about what's happened there, because of what you're talking about, social distancing and the possibilities of playing that sport safely, the golf clubs, when they were allowed by their the laws of their countries to resume playing, their courses were absolutely jam full of people. And so I think, you know, without sounding too positive, but one of the positive things that's happening is that people are realizing that something they took for granted is so important to them, was so central to their lives, that they, at the first opportunity, returned in great numbers. What will happen in the next month or two with sports where physical proximity means that they are still restricted? I think that people are prepared. They have to be prepared, but I think that they are finding out that they are missing something that they love more than they truly understood. I think more people will realize that they've taken things for granted. That's happened in many parts of life. Maybe even that's happening in the church, with sacraments not being available in some countries at certain times, that maybe people are realizing when it's taken from them, when it's unavailable, that you realize that you missed something at so many different levels. So I'm not sure where you are, Daniele, whether you're more pessimistic than me. I hope I'm being realistic. But what happened in golf in my own country here was that the enthusiasm is as though the game is in its first year. It's incredible, absolutely incredible. And I expect people who've loved sport before will be back because they now know what they really have missed and what it brings to their lives.
Thank you, Mark, for this answer, and Daniele for the question. I would like to read a comment from Linda Del Rio. She says, perhaps we initiate a global conversation of what we are all presently seeing, hearing, and doing in our respective communities that are outstanding. For example, I'm seeing the women, spouses, and families on group chats that share what they are feeling, but celebrating collectively their joys and struggles of not being present at the stadiums to see their husbands, sons, fathers, or family members. What has been unprecedented is the connection of the women that we never seen each other. I don't know if you want to comment anything on this.
If we're talking about maybe greater visibility of those people who are always part of, let's call it the broader support network, and recognition that And I think I'm very lucky as a sports psychologist, a performance psychologist, who've worked for many years with athletes, and that they will tell me maybe things that they wouldn't tell the media, that they won't tell the outside world, about how crucial their family support is, whether that's from wives, girlfriends, sisters, but brothers and fathers and extended family. So I think that, if you like, maybe this is a time to understand at all sorts of levels the incredible support that is usually not so visible and not so acknowledged. And maybe that will be something that we need to pay more attention to in the future. And if that's the point that's being made, then I absolutely agree.
Mm-hmm. Father Patrick Kelly says, I was wondering how you understand the relationship between well-being and performance. For example, can too much focus on performance undermine well-being? And on the other hand, how does well-being lead to improved performance?
Okay, so obviously, let's use these very general terms. Too much focus on performance. Actually, to be precise, as a sports psychologist, I'm meant to be asking them to focus only on performance, not results, not winning, not victory. Performance being the processes that they have some control over. So let's not get into the detail because we'll do a sports psychology lecture. But so the focus is actually on performance. If what Father's asking there is excessive focus on outcomes, that brings negative anxiety. You can't control those fully. Those are things that are going to take place in the future. So the focus is on performance processes, but yes, not excessive focus, absolutely not excessive focus on the extrinsic rewards, as in winning. That in most cases causes anxiety of a negative type and maybe problems around belief and confidence. In terms of well-being, how can well-being affect performance? I'm sorry, well-being means that when I go home, it's a really good idea that I've not got a divorce. It's a really good idea that when I go home, I am relaxed because my family are happy to see me and that the rest of my life is in a good place. That affects my well-being, which affects my sleep pattern, which affects my eating, which affects my drinking, which affects everything. And then that affects my performance. This is an integrated whole. This is not controversial with elite athletes. It's only controversial with academics. It's not controversial with elite athletes. I don't mean Father, because I know he's asking for a very particular reason. He's hopefully asking for me to articulate this. It's not controversial because if you assume the athlete is a human person, then well-being and performance are intimately related. They connect to each other. They're not synonymous, but they connect. So well-being, lifestyle is another way of describing it, is intimately connected. And it's not just me who's interested. High-level coaches are very interested in the well-being of their performers, not just for ethical reasons, but also for performance reasons.
Thank you. I would like to join to put together two questions. One from Ben Railing, who says, how best can we, he says, your work with athletes and teams is important, but how best can we reinforce this approach at the ground level more broadly? And what can we learn from other faith practices you referenced? And another question I found very interesting, especially regarding topics of identity and femininity, is from Queen Guevara from Australia. It says, thank you for this. I led a women's basketball community in Sydney. We are a grassroots community. We started in 2013, one team, and now we have 4 teams and a development program. Our pillars are faith, excellence, and God's love. Everything you are saying makes a lot of sense. While many women come for the game, many are realizing now how closely related playing sports and faith is. We run formation around sports and faith. Do you have resources we could look at that can help us form something more specific to our women's community regarding sport and identity and femininity? Thank you.
Okay, let's take the first 2 questions. In terms of translating some of these ideas to the ground, to recreational level sport, to the non-professional areas. I would say there's a couple of things, very practical things that need to take place. First is a different educational formation in the universities. And why the universities? Because in my country, 50% of 19-year-olds go to university. In the United States, the number is similar. Other countries around the world will have different experiences, but the type of material that students are exposed to is crucial in terms of their understanding of some of the things we've been talking about now. And that material, therefore, will be relevant because most of those people, most of my students in the last 25 years do not work in professional sport. They do not work in high-level sport. They work for governing bodies of sport. They work with amateur and recreational performers. So the formation of the teachers, the sports scientists, the coaches, people who will, sports development officers, people who work is absolutely crucial to bringing some of these messages through to the ground. So it's education and formation is the key. In terms of other faith groups, there's so much, as you can hear it in my voice, it's so frustrating to me. Well done for those people, but it's incredible that the biggest Christian group, the biggest Christian faith has only in recent years begun to make these sorts of strides forward. But there's so much wonderful material that they have. And they have a huge amount of material in terms of, if you like, using sport as a more formal vehicle for spiritual growth and development. Now, that might not always fit into the Catholic tradition, so have to be used carefully and sensitively. But they have huge amounts of material that are about a very explicit way of using sport to develop an understanding of spiritual life and spirituality, around ethics, around fair play, around morality. So not to oversell some of that material, but it's well worth looking at. In terms of women and faith, I'm not sure really I'm best placed to answer that one. I know, again, and I'm sounding like a broken record, but there will be literature that's from that tradition there. I hope we've got some literature ourselves that we're developing, but I'm sure there will be other people who will come on in later webinars who will be able to answer that question more precisely.
Great, thank you. Another question. As a historian, I'm struck by the similar questions as Mark suggests in this COVID-19 time, with the Catholic moral theologians, bishops, and the Holy See had towards the ideologies during the interwar period who materialized and reduced sport to fit in their philosophies. They stressed the person of the athlete and the possibility for sport to be a vehicle of spiritual dimension. Maybe the commercialization of sports we live in since 30 years just does and did the same as these ideologies.
I mean, I'm not a historian, but I think I understand some of what's been asked in the question. I'm sure, hopefully, the apologies in there if not, but sport can be used and abused for absolutely anything. In one sense, and this is maybe overstating it, but in one sense it is neutral. It could be used for values that are destructive, values that are very much opposed to the church, very much opposed to the faith, and so this is why this is so important, what we're doing now, what we're trying to do. This is another opportunity, yet another opportunity. And there's always opportunities, but it's yet another one, a strange one, as we said, that was very, very unforeseen, to try and reclaim, and this is how I put it, to reclaim some of the ways of seeing sport that I believe were implicitly understood 50 or 60 years ago in many places, not everywhere, but many places, that they were implicitly understood because people shared in their faith and saw that that connected to their work life, their family life, and everything else that they did. It was all interconnected, and nobody needed to have university courses to discuss in depth an account. I think now we do. And I think, you know, and I keep saying I'm going back, but I'm looking at literature over here. I'm looking at wonderful literature. It happens to be German, it happens to be English, American, but it's literature that is Catholic literature. It's, you know, talking about sport directly, and it's talking about sport indirectly under the remit of leisure or leisure, if you're an American. It's that type of literature that we need. It's that formation and education that we need of young students in the Catholic universities and elsewhere. That's what they should be exposed to, not only a secular account of sport. That's what we've all had for 50 years. It would be nice to hear academic literature that can actually provide an alternative view. That's what we need, unless we're going to, if in that vacuum, then others will step in and form sport into something that is opposed to our philosophy and view.
Thank you. We are about to finish because we already passed our deadline, but I would like to finish with two questions. One is from Alessandra Valente. She says, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm thinking about sport at school. In the school gyms, every student has their own space, their own area of action. Abolish team games, abolish proximity. How much we risk to lose? Sport is an undeniable container of values. And a similar question from Domenico. He says, if it is a big problem to have to postpone an elite sporting event like the Ryder Cup, how can amateur sports survive with stadiums and gyms closed or with limited participation due to the possibility of it?
Okay, let me have a go at the first one about, I think it was about team sport and about maybe, and we've actually been down this path here in a UK perspective, but I'm sure other countries have had similar experiences where educationalists of various types have objected to competitive sport, typically team sport, but individual as well. And I think looking back over all those years, one of the reasons for that is because, rightly or wrongly, they saw team sport as engendering an excessive competitive ethos, a win at all costs mentality. Well, it doesn't have to be that. Take it back, reclaim it, bring the spirit and ethos of sport back in. Don't allow the cynics to say it can't be done. It can be done. It was done before. It needs to be articulated. It needs to be explained why that is crucial. It needs to be explained fundamentally that if sport is only about extreme competition, it's actually not sport. It's something else. Goodness knows what it is, but it's not a sports match. It's something else. And so you can't, you know, you can understand how people have been able to say this because of what they've seen. So it's time to reclaim and renew. The second question about amateur sport, about survival. Well, I hope that this is not going to be the new normal, so-called. Certainly that's how it's called in English. I hope it's not. I hope that we will pass through this and come back out the other side. And I see people running. I see people taking part in pursuits at a recreational level that they're able to do, that there is allowed at this moment: cycling, running, gym work in spaces around their houses, in the gardens. I see a whole host of activity that's taking place that tells me the spirit of sport in different forms is alive and well. The bigger forms that we have, returning to stadiums, returning to more organized competition, I'm sure that is waiting to be reborn. But I see huge amounts of activity still taking place. And it's personal testimony, some of this. It's anecdotal, it's not data. But many people are taking part in activities. and increasing their fitness and psychological health in ways that they weren't doing when they were consumed by work, consumed by other activities. So strangely, in the lockdown, there was all sorts of, again, mostly anecdotal, but anecdotal evidence that many people were taking to walking, all sorts of forms of sport and activity, physical activity, that could take place.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Mark.
Santiago.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity to and for accepting to answer so many questions. I think from the number of questions we have received, your topic was highly valued, and I thank you for your effort and accepting being here with us. I would like to ask Simone, please, if you can show us the next session of next week. We can close this session presenting those who will be our next speakers on the October the 8th, which will be Father Patrick Kelly, Professor of Theology and Religious Studies at University of Detroit Mercy in the United States, Dian Castillejo Garcia, former tennis player, Filipino tennis player and sports reporter, and Wolfgang Baumann from Germany, the General Secretary of the Commission member of the International Olympic Committee. And we will talk about giving the best of yourself, which is the title of the first Vatican document on sport. We have been talking about Catholic literature, and with Mark, we used to say that we are 50 years late, but we are striving to get there. So we will talk about this first Vatican document and how can sport can be a model for life, sport as a role for life. So I thank you. I thank you, all of you. I hope that you all enjoy. Please stay safe and see you next week. Same time, same channel. Don't miss it. And thank you again for your presence. Thank you very much and see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Santiago.